But that puts us to our third group of questions, which starts with um, Tim Lisko asks about the relationship between being born with a cowl or a witch's birthmark, and the concept of witch blood. And I mean, I think this is kind of an easy question. They are basically the same concept, or at least tied together. There's lots of cultures have different marks or different uh, things that will mark a child when they're born as being magical or being different. And it's the same idea that you're going to have some people who are just kind of be born in a little bit of a strange way and be a little bit different because of it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's also certain like witch lineages in various cultures that will have like similar physical aspects, right? Like for example, it's like, oh yes, this person comes from dwarven stock and they look like it. Or this person is a sort of an elf creature and they look like it. And, this is actually one of the things where I think you can spot a faker from not. There are certain things that like if you don't walk the walk, you aren't that specific thing. You may be a thing. Because again, I think this is funny. Some cultures have a generic like this person's got the witch blood. I don't know what the fuck they are, but they're something. And then some like, oh, this person is in fact a Rusalka, or this person is in fact these other things because there are physical tells. There are relics of the lineage in that person. And sometimes they even have triggering points in the adolescence where like the kid was super sickly or whatever, and then something happens, and then all of a sudden they're robust, or the reverse. And then there are certain other things in various cultures, specifically like Andean shamanic cultures, where it's like if you're struck by lightning, yeah, that was a sign that you were always the thing, and now you get to be a shaman. It's like, but I don't want to be a shaman. That's unfortunate because you just got struck by lightning, and that's all you get to do now. And they had to think they dreamed of being an accountant one day, but no, no, you have to be a shaman.
I feel like that question, there's not a lot to dig in there, but did anyone else have anything they want to add on with it?
Well, this isn't really an answer to that question. It's just, I think a lot. Okay, so because I had that traumatic birth experience, like it's a thing that's on my mind. Is that why I'm witch blooded? Like, I don't think it can be because, again, there's also an element of it running in my family. Also, being a witch is like not even the weirdest thing about me. Like there are a lot of other weird things, and I don't know how they all intersect. But I do think a lot about how, like, this kind of phenomenon where like I and my mother both died in childbirth and then got better. There's like starting with people like about my age, right? So people who are approaching 50 now, and even much more so in younger people. There's like all these people, like people who never would have survived birth
Mm-hmm.
in most other historical contexts. And I do think about like what that does to a person, right? Because I think like dying and coming back, like we talk about these transformative experiences that get you witched, like dying and coming back is a very
Yeah.
folklorically common kind. And like a lot more people do that now than used to,
Oh, sure.
especially as little kids. And I just, like, I have no answer to that, but that's a thing I think about a lot. Like, what does that mean? Not just in terms of like individuals, but in a population to have so many people who have returned from the dead. Like, how does that play out
Well,
socially?
that's an
I have no
interesting
answer.
thing. I think another thing to think about too, almost on the reverse, is if anybody does any sort of really deep study into Soviet psychic experiments, you will find there is a huge preponderation of extraordinarily psychic men and women who did not develop their special witch abilities until their 50th birthdays.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very common thing across the world. So in a culture, and I often tell this to students and stuff, because I have students who are like, I'm 51 and I started magic last year and I can do this stuff now and I never could. Why? That's a very common thing. And in a culture and a world that fetishizes both brilliance and youth intertwined and nothing else, it's important to understand that, like, you may not have the gift right now, but there is gigantic amounts of researchable, you can Google this shit evidence
Mm-hmm.
to show you that there is a bounty of people in the world always, and today especially, who gain these abilities in their later years. And also, those are the ones who are least likely to talk about it, especially if you look at the Soviets specifically. there were people that would show up to these researches because they, again, it was a very materialist, atheistic culture by design, who would be like born in Moscow, who go, yeah, I can move things with my mind now. I don't know why, but I could. In fact, the woman who has the highest rated, according to Soviet research, and I forget her name, but you can look this up on the Mr. Mythos YouTube channel, uh, amount of telekinesis that's like allegedly, and again, I haven't seen obviously like the footage of it. I don't think you can see on the internet, but like the research will be like this woman could move shit with her mind, not a little bit, but a lot. Couldn't do it until she was 40, and there wasn't any like early menopause issues. There wasn't. She could just do it. Like according to her own thing, one day she could just do it, and then she trained it because it was fun. But she did it in secret because she was like, "Oh, you know what the fuck." And then the research opportunities came up, and she saw that as a way to legitimize herself, but also, frankly, if we're being, I think, a little bit honest, to protect herself from the cultural issues of the time. So,
Yeah.
to that end, if anybody is listening to this and they're like down in the mouth about I'm 33 years old and well, you know, I can't get the Jesus Club death and I can't, you know, all these things. Maybe I'm not special. If you know, if you hit your 50th birthday and nothing happens, yeah, maybe not. But I wonder because there's also an interesting correlation between people hitting 50 and becoming suddenly very scholarly, especially in agrarian communities, and suddenly becoming different or like, oh, my bones can feel the weather better now and all these things. Like the gifts may start subtle. You may have a lifetime of
Alex is young because as an old person, I don't think there's anything witchy about my
no.
new
So specifically, I'm not talking about like the normal pressure.
joke.
Yeah. But like I suppose it'd be easier, like my bones can create the weather. But
Yeah,
like but in general, like you could you still have you're still in the running, kids. Like you can still get it done.
I agree. And
Yeah.
as I've gotten older, I have also experienced that, right? Like I can feel things like there are certain periods in my life where like I could feel things like kick in
Mhm.
and
Oh
other
yeah.
things got harder, you know, like over the course of a lifetime.
Oh, sure. I'm actually. I think it's a kind of uncontroversial to say that like the truly deeply witchy people, especially if you really lean into it, not only do you get better because you do it for longer, but there's a conjure saying that like a shattered or withering body allows the spirit to fly more freely. Um, as you age, you become more spiritually potent, and
Yeah.
also if you suffered traumatic damage
Mhm.
you can often become more spiritually potent. It's why like the deformed or crippled witch in a lot of cultures, particularly I'm thinking about like the Moroccan Marabou Blacklight Baraka people,
Mhm.
they'll often be deformed and be given this. Like whether they were born with it or not, they'll be given it. Or like it's said that certain deformed Obeah people are stronger because you know they're gifted that as compensation for that.
Mhm.
For context, I don't know how true that is, but
I think also like the one thing I've seen referenced for some elements of Bantu culture is that the as you are dying, like the strength leaving your body becoming more infirm, more sickly, more weak, is that strength moving towards your spirit body, that your spirit becomes stronger and healthier and ready for the next world as your body weakens. So that kind of continuum between the strength of the body and the strength of the spirit makes sense, which also fits with the idea of like witch sickness and kind of transformative sickness with the infection of witch power or going through some adolescent phase where you're sick and then come out of it and you have these capabilities as well. That it's like your physical body is kind of turning things off while your spirit body is kicking up the work it's doing to develop.
Yeah. Look, as a lifetime sickly infirm, I know I'm not visibly deformed, but actually my body is not shaped like normal bodies. It's just not as obvious. Like I like this theory, but I will also say I think a lot of it, like Alex kind of touched on this, and you said it too, that like I think it's particularly the kinds of magic that are about, like, in their essence, some kind of like spirit flight. And I say that because, like, having taught magic to a lot of people, the people I know who are like the most sort of athletic and really focused on like training their body, they're great at some kinds of magic. Kinds that are about like Alison was saying, like going inside your body and like knowing things and moving energy around. They're great at that, but they are garbage at spirit. Like, and I can watch them. It's because they freak the fuck out. Like they start to detach from their body and they're like, oh no, my body, that's the best part of me. Whereas I'm like, oh, I cannot be in my body. That's great. That's the worst part of me.
Well, that was like
Partly it's that.
when I was a teenager, I did a lot more like spirit flight type work, and I don't enjoy it as much now. Um, but I had a time a few years ago where I was like, oh, I need to do something where I get kind of deep into a spirit flight situation. I'm gonna ask a fairy friend to carry me to where I need to go. And so I call upon the fairy, and I kind of like seem like reaching out to like touch my face. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I've got to make you weak. And he's like, I've got to put you to sleep. I'm like, no. And he's like, no, this is how it works. And I'm like, no, stop. And he's like, just stop. You've got to be weak for this to happen. Your body's got to be in like this weak, infirm state. And so like he touches me and it's like taking opium. Like you like I start feeling like drifty and like sleepy. And it's like I was like completely fine and aware, and then just like bam, it's like everything is shut down. Um so I think that makes sense, kind of the tie to certain types of magic. And obviously like the in a lot of cultures that spirit flight thing is a big focus. Like it's a big part of the people who are marked as different and able to do these things. It's that they're able to go into the spirit world easily, or they're even compelled to and forced to at certain times of the year where they don't have control over it.
Hmm. I mean, I think it's also interesting too, like even just in a cultivation community context, those who are said to have like earth bodies, this isn't even like a body type thing, although some would argue that it is. I would disagree. Who are just simply more rooted in their bodies, they're trained in astral projection differently. And a lot of that works around a sort of elemental equilibrium stacking where there's an elemental imbalance where you're too rooted, so you need to train with the other elements in a different way to create that. And then, you can go through there. And I've found that to be, and I'm not the only one who speaks on this or teaches on it either, but I've taught people who are like, I cannot astral project to save my life, to do it after, doing it in a different way. Granted, it's kind of the long way round.
I think that's very true. I said they were bad at it, but I'm sure it's
No,
just
no, they were.
they
No, you were right. They were objectively bad at it. If you can't do it, you suck at it. That's not a personal
or, yeah.
failing, but like that. But if you want to be good at it, but it goes back to my whole thing about like sometimes you got to do a little extra work to get where other people were. But I've also found that if people learn how to do it this way, they kind of snap to being able to do it the normal way, because a lot of it comes with this: have you balanced yourself, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's different gifts do manifest in different people. What I find to be particularly interesting, though, is a nature of witch blood that I think is not often spoken of is the the fact that we don't get in our own way a lot with this, because there's that natural, like, this is a real thing, this has been my lived experience, I'm not going to stop myself from doing these things by assuming that they can't be done. Like the burden of proof is less or not at all in a lot of us, at least the ones I've known who were also occultists and able to do these things. It's kind of like, well, of course astral projection's possible. They don't have that, like, I'm doing this to see if it can be done, or I'm doing magic to see if it works. I think that one of the reasons why we're able to express this more immediately is because the majority of us start a little further down the line. Like the burden of proof is a hurdle we don't have. And that is, again, having taught people, that is a gigantic hurdle for everyone who has it. And some people never truly get past it. And, I genuinely can only imagine what a life like that would be.
Yeah, I think at first when you were like, we don't get our own way, like in my head, I'm like, oh, I get in my own way all the time
No, no,
about
yeah.
regular
No, no, no,
life.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's that that
Like,
that, that that's not what I mean.
but yes, no, what you're talking about there. I remember in college, I was in a class, uh, philosophy of parapsychology, and we were talking about fear of psi, and I thought it was the most garbage idea ever. And like the professor, he was like former head of like American Parapsychological Research Association or whatever their organization was. And I'm just like, what is he talking about? This idea that like people encounter a moment where they experience power, they experience psychism as real, and then they shut off their ability to do it because they're afraid of the implications of it. I'm like, no one would do that. If you found power, you would just want more power and do more. And I think again, it's like coming out of that background of like that this stuff is sort of normal and it's like a thing and you cultivate it, then yeah, you're gonna have that sense where like it's not like something you're afraid of, and so you psychologically shut it down for yourself. Um, but since then, I've totally seen people do that all the time, and like language in like the magical community, even where people kind of write off magic and find ways to describe it away and to justify it as these smaller, less impactful things, almost as a smokescreen to hide like the potential of it because it's safer, it's more convenient, it's easier to have a world where it's just thoughts and prayers and happy feelings as opposed to you might call upon a spirit and it might wither part of you as part of your interaction with it, or like you might have to actually deal with destroying a bunch of stuff nearby you as a side effect of something that you're trying to do. Um, the I think there's a difference of that kind of like you're just part of that world and you know that that's just how things are going to be sometimes versus people who are just like, oh my gosh, is the world really like that? I'd rather the world not be like that.
I think it's true, but I also think like it's not always an access to power. Like for me, my early experiences of my psychism were about being able to hear my mother's trauma flashbacks from like someone else, like when we were not physically there. Like it was not a thing that gave me power. It was a thing that like was both painful and inconvenient. Like the experience of it was emotionally and intellectually overwhelming, not in a way, not in a like cognitive dissonance way, like, oh, I've been taught this isn't real. Because, you know, the thing about growing up Jewish is I already knew the overwhelming majority of people in the world were wrong about fundamentally how the world works. So, like, the second part, like, the magic part was just more of the same. Like, I thought, oh, just Christians don't believe in magic because they're dumb and they don't believe in a lot of obviously true stuff. Right. But, like, the psychism was a painful experience. Like psychism only gives you power when the people around you are like have stuff in their minds that is useful as opposed to terrible. And my experience as a psychic kid was that like a lot of the people I was around were being tormented in their head all the time, and it took me a long time to be able to sort out that that wasn't happening to me. I was like catching it from someone else.
Yeah, no, I
A
definitely
lot of legitimate reasons, like I definitely got in my own way with it for a long time and still do in many ways.
no, I agree with that experience totally. And I mean, and obviously, like your experience doesn't need me to agree with it, but like but no, like that, like what I was saying earlier with the feelings from other people, like that was painful. Like that was something I didn't like having as an adolescent. But even younger than that, seeing spirits all over the place, like a lot of times we talk about we're definitely in a phase where people try to talk about spirits as like nice and friendly and happy and all, but like if you're just like out in the world, there are a lot of spirits that are not. And it is scary when you're like a small child. And so for me, a lot of it was like latching onto the ones that were helpful and that would keep me safe, and then introduce me to other ones that would teach me things and that I could learn from and all of that. So I think the I'm not necessarily saying that it's like you're kind of immersed in this like, oh, if you're born to this, you have a desire for power and you're seeking power. But I mean more in a sense of like you're not going to have the aversion to like the idea of power is scary because the things that allow you to have power, it's like you know they're real. Like you can't get away from them being real. So or it's a lot harder to get away from them being real at that point. So the idea of like, I can just close my eyes, pretend these things don't exist. It's harder to do that than it is for people who have less immersion in the other parts of the world.
I think in our culture, a lot of people, I can't speak for everybody, and especially like for people like maybe you or Alex who came up in like a witch friendlier environment, like, but at least for me, and I think for many other people, like you have to decide whether you're insane or whether you're a wizard.
Yeah.
And I want to say that I picked wizard every time, but I didn't. Like Allison watched me pick, oh no, I'm just crazy, but multiple occasions in my like adolescence and early 20s. And like I knew that what I was experiencing was, I don't know, knowing I was experiencing it was not the same as knowing that it was real.
Mhm.
Even though I knew it was useful. I knew it was useful. Like I knew I was hearing voices and that the voices were generally helpful and gave me access to information I did not otherwise have. But I also assumed I could be both psychic and insane.
Well,
So,
one can.
Yeah.
yeah, sure. I know as someone who's maybe both psychic. But I do think that like knowing you're having an experience is actually not the same as knowing something is real. And I think our culture really feeds a narrative to a lot of people that they're just crazy.
Mm.
And that's one of the reasons, like, to go back to what we said at the very beginning, like, why does this conversation matter? To me, it matters to like tell young people, like, hey, you have a choice. You could be a wizard instead of being insane. And I'll say, having done both, wizard is definitely better.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's interesting too, the number of people who have psychic gifts, who have witchblood, who have these things, who also, much like magicians in general, have the same level of propensity to fall to delusion. I mean, the main character syndrome in witch-blooded people is actually far worse in
Agreed.
general, because on some level, and I stress some level, it may be to a degree true. Like you may be like, oh no, I have a spirit family on the other side, and I'm special there, and I'm this and I'm that, and so I feel special in this world too. And it's like that's all well and good, but like if the spirits don't tell you things that are real, then that thing is useless. You know, I tell this to my students too. There's the maybe box. You put every fucking thing in the maybe box unless it's verifiable and it doesn't matter. Like, oh, cool, Vision of Atlantis? Fucking maybe. I don't know. Would be cool. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I'm this special thing. But the number of witches that I have known in my life who believe that because of pedigree, they can call on certain abilities or favors or whatever in the world that they simply can't. And then they will do this big spell and they'll feel really good. And then they'll think that they've done a thing that did not, and I stress, did fucking not happen. And then they will walk around for the rest of their lives going, oh, yeah, I did that. I managed to do this. I controlled this situation in such a way. Like, once again, just because you have the gift doesn't mean your magic is any good, reliably, reproducibly. This is why, like to Allison's point, the training is important. But like I said, I think that because the delusion must feel good. Again, a thing I can truly only imagine. You know, I came from a place that inspired me, that affirmed me, but that also held me to a very sobering standard about like you still need to mow the lawn, you still take a shit every day, you still do these things, you are not better because of that, and also most importantly, you can be killed the same way a person can be killed, and as such, you are not better until you are bulletproof every time, not just once. You are not better. Unless you can like pick up and throw a car, you are not better. You're still a person in a person's body. And again, the number of witches I've known who will waste years of their lives astral projecting to fairy realms in which they're at least told that they're very special. You know, whether you are or you aren't. Another thing I always bring up is I'm like, so are there no wars in these realms? There's no fairy slavery. These kingdoms aren't at war. Like, okay, yeah, the place you go after you die might be real, but it might be sacked by a rival like red cap nation in a period of time, and then you may be enslaved for 1,000 years before you can escape to a body again. Like the spirit world is a dark forest, and it is not kind, and I stress that always. Which is one of the reasons why creating strong magic is also creating power. that can be transferred to that. But to that end, I mean, the amount of delusion in this is staggering. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
that is the only criticism that I will not contest at all about, like, yeah, people who talk about Witchblood tend to be delusional fucks. And yes, the lion's share of them tend to be, because they tend to believe everything a spirit tells them without verifying it. And then especially if it makes them feel good about themselves, because I think a person needs to look at what their own insecurities are and go, yeah, if a spirit's telling me that everything wrong with me is actually good, I'm being fucking lied to. Like, come on now. This is silly, which is why you should ask your spirits the real questions and tell them to prove it if something is being told to you. But yeah, that thing specifically, and God, I mean, this is the thing that actually gets in my craw because I see it a lot. I see it a lot. And I mean, it's like, yeah, even if you're right, which you're not, but even if you're right that after this life you will be a pampered, glorious royalty creature, and everything's gonna be wonderful, and there's gonna be no more pain and no more harm and no more whatever, and kumbaya heaven forever. You still have a body right now, and you probably had to do a great deal to get it, so you might as well make the best of it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with especially the stuff you're saying about like interacting with the spirits in the spirit world. Like, I was at a ritual recently where every single spirit that every person there wanted to engage was engageable, and everything that the spirit said was meaningful and made the people feel better. And I like completely was like, this is really underwhelming, and I don't trust this ritual anymore. And I don't know if this is because of performing in public or if this is because of like just this is how it is, but it left me with some questions. And I think that one thing a lot of people don't think about with the spirit world is it's different from our world and the way that spirits relate to time and place and what it means to be factual from a spirit perspective versus what it means to be factual from our perspective are very different things. And so you've got that element that you need to contend with, but then you also need to contend with the fact that like a spirit might just like tell you what is useful to tell you because it helps them get what they want, or like for whatever motivation, like the same reason that other people come up with stuff. Like they might not know, and so they might just be like, "Well, I should give this person an answer," or it could just be your imagination. Like
Could
the
be.
like I think there's a lot of things where it's like people are not willing to vet and explore and question those things enough. And I think especially when we're dealing with the okay, let's step outside of the small world and look at a bigger picture of what's possible with magic, then it becomes even more important to question those things and have some space for doubt until stuff is proven. And even once things are demonstrated and you've got a bunch of stuff to say like, okay, I can tell that this is pretty much real. I've verified it. Having some doubt can still be healthy. Uh, but I think for me, a lot of times, like the people who say really ridiculous stuff, I just kind of sidestep a lot of those conversations. And oh, it's easy not. That's what I have a fear of is people saying ridiculous things. That's what I try not to engage with.
Well, sure, and you have to look at
Yeah.
like how often people can be motivated to make crucially ridiculous life decisions. Like lifelong Solomonic magician here, the number of Solomonic magicians who become remarkably religious or, God forbid, become Mormons is staggering, like truly staggering, and that hampers everything that they have built. Every time I have never, and I've observed it my whole life, and I have never seen it benefit anyone truly. And all it will do is create hilarious misconceptions about what things are based on a lens that they force magic to feed into rather than being told. I mean, the thing is, the thing I believe the most is when a spirit says, I like, as I have plenty of spirits who say they don't know. Like, I don't know, I'll find out, or I'll do my best to find out, but I don't know. Or like, you wouldn't understand, or I can't make this known to you in a way that you will fathom. But also, like, when you look at like public rituals, I'm more inclined to less believe the person who's prancing around saying they're being ridden by the spirit, and more inclined to believe the dude crouched in the corner where no one's watching who's mumbling prophecy that ends up being true. Like that's the thing, you saw, I've seen those things both play out. But even then, we have to look at our individual limitations. Like, again, hand to God, I know only two people who can stock pick with divination effectively. And it took them like half a decade of practice of like essentially paper trading with tarot to be 70% reliable, which is still astonishing. Like if you think about the number of factors, but like they trained for that. And good mediums, good people who receive spirit information train. It's like every time I tell people to practice automatic writing, they scoff. And I'm like, what? So mediumship isn't automatic talking? Like, like what you don't have a record, you have an eidetic memory and you remember everything that you're told. No, you fucking don't. Shut up. Like take notes. It's no there's no shame in taking fucking notes. But like that's the thing. People and again, people don't keep records to go back to. They don't realize that so much spirit communication is very similar to dreaming, where you know dream journals help you remember your dreams, blah blah blah. All this shit that we all know, everyone knows here, preaching to the choir. But like to bring it back around to Witchblood, when you are more prone to visionary experience, you are also more prone to being deceived. Because one thing I will say about witch-blooded people that I have seen who did not grow up as in as fortunate circumstances I have is this need to be affirmed. And it's not a thing I'm denigrating, not a thing I'm saying is bad. But when you grow up your whole life thinking you're crazy or stupid or both or wrong somehow,
I have spent this whole conversation holding myself back from being like, you guys don't think I'm delusional, right? No, totally.
but truly, if a person grows up, and I've known plenty, the first spirit that rolls around and goes, no, you are the main character, you are this, you are that, they're going to jump onto. And I don't even necessarily blame them because, again, and this is the thing I see as a problem writ large in the magical community, those with a full plate criticizing the behavior of those who are starving is a remarkably common phenomenon in this community specifically. And frankly, you should be ashamed of yourselves if you've ever done that, people listening. I don't appreciate it. But truly it's one of those things like, you know, you look at the behavior of somebody and you're like, well, I wouldn't. Well, yeah, you wouldn't, but it's one of the reasons why I don't specifically comment on a lot of people's behavior at this point in my life is I had a very sobering realization that I am the luckiest creature I know when it comes to this. The only creatures luckier than me are my brother's children.
So I'll tell you something, Alex. Like when my friend circle first met you, there was a lot of like chatter, like it's obviously just like, but he does seem like he's real. Like we went back and forth for a long time.
You know what? I have been
Like
told
he's
that.
pretty real, but how can these stories be true?
I know I've been told that by a lot of people. The number of people, especially when I hit like 35 going up, who were like, when I met you, I thought you were a bullshitter, but it's all true. And
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah. And there are people who have been so fucking angry at me for that being true. And again, I don't apologize for my magnificence not one time. But, you know, again, I also had the realization of like, not everybody was lucky like me. And when I was younger, especially, it's kind of funny though, coming from that kind of background, then you run into like the 90s chaos magic stereotypes where they're like, oh, I don't know if this stuff's real. And I'm like, I want to hit you. Like, I want bad shit to happen to you. And again, people who still, it's a criticism that I levy particularly if 90s chaos magicians were telling the truth about like we only want to do what works and what actually functions, then they'd all be grimoire magicians and praying to saints and doing shamanic journeying and stuff. They actually didn't. They didn't want magic to be real. I affirm that they didn't want it to be real. And those who, you know, like for example, Alan Moore wrote that book recently where it's like a guy who sucked at magic a long time ago comes back after being out of the game for 20 years and continues to suck at magic to the same degree that he did and doesn't realize that the game has changed profoundly. But I always understood how it worked because I was lucky enough to have the right teachers. But that's another thing too. I mean, there are people who didn't. The majority of people didn't. And they stumble into things and they have this yearning to be deeply understood because that's really what everyone wants, like to be seen, to be understood, all that, you know, basic stuff. Which is why the society of those like you, if you are like this, is so precious and so forgivable when it fails. Because it's like, well, I only have these people that see me. I'll deal with their drug addiction. I'll deal with their fuckery. I'll deal with whatever. A thing I have witnessed from the outside looking in a lot to see that like it's essentially a human nature thing or a witch nature thing, as it were. But like, yeah, you know, but at the same time, as hard as it is to say, that is doubly why personal discernment is important. Like, I should never have expected people to believe my life story when I was younger. But a naive part of me was like, but I was there. I know it happened. And, but again, I mean, only some of us became professional magicians. I'm just saying, it's almost like I was right all along. But true though that may be, um, to those who yearn and those who feel deeply misunderstood and whatnot, finding the society of those like you is still a thing you need to hesitate to jump directly into, because psychosis and delusion are things you need to watch out for.
Yeah, I think the I haven't had the benefit of getting to meet your family or people around you like Sarah and Allison have, but um I guess for me there was enough stuff that just seemed familiar in how you talked about stuff, plus intuition. But I think that is a huge element of navigating any part of the community, not just uh this part of the community, is having that ability to kind of like, how do you judge what people are saying? How much stock do you put in what people are saying? Like how, and I think there needs to be an acceptance of being able to let people like tell their stories about what it is that they are and what their background is, and not putting any value on it at all. And just being like, okay, well, this person has said these things, and until it somehow impacts me or my interaction with them, it doesn't matter to me whether these are real or not. I'm not going to put a great deal of investment in that or let that change or shape who I am, because that can be a quick way to fall down a bad rabbit hole, uh, if like those people are full of shit and you don't have the stuff to keep yourself from being swept up in their bullshit. But
Oh, sure.
It's true in any, like, we're talking about this, but I mean, look, the fact that magic is real doesn't mean that a lot of magicians aren't fake.
yeah,
Oh, that's true.
And
Yeah.
even the ones who are real magicians, a lot of them are still lying about lots of stuff. But I also think that's true in every other community. Like this idea that like people say a lot of things about themselves, and it's better to generally just like, I agree with BJ, like just like doesn't impact me whether or not that's true or not. So like I can just let it be. Like I don't know that that is more the case in magic than it is anywhere else. Like everywhere's full of crazy
No,
people.
that's a really fair point. Another thing I think it's funny to bring up is like, I've known people who used to suck at magic and were bullshitters, disappeared for 5 years, trained real hard, and then they come back and they can do the thing. Like, so then at what point, like, well, what are they then in your mind? Like, because and I remember specifically, it's like I often tell people to divine ruthlessly on people in your life, And of course, if you are a good enough diviner, you're gonna know what it feels like to run up against a glamour or an illusion of some kind. But like, I've known people who I'm like, wow, this person fucking trash, and they're making shit up, and then you see them years later, and you're like, what happened to you? You can you can do the damn thing now without, because again, a thing I often bring out to people is if you have talent, especially in today's day and age with as many resources, you are 2 years away from being intermediately good, which is better than most magicians will ever be.
Agree.
2 summers, 2 winters, that's all it takes of diligent work, and then you can reliably change your life with this.
I
From
agree.
zero, by the way.
Or 6 years of not even that diligently work.
I mean, you could,
Like,
but most
like,
people want it
when
fast.
older, I'm leaning more into like actually 6 years is also not very long.
No, it's truly
Like,
truly
you
not
don't like I
necessary.
know a lot of people, and I'm not opposed to like hard work and hard training. But I also think that there's this narrative now that like it's all super hard. And I do think that like no man, like if you're not having fun doing magic, I don't mean you, like
Sure.
broadly, right? If you're like all work and no play makes people boring, and if magic's not fun, I genuinely think maybe you're doing it wrong.
Okay, so I agree with you there. The reason why I bring up that timeline specifically, though, well, 2 reasons. One, people in general feel anxious at the moment. They feel powerless. They feel like this. Not that that's ever not really been the case, broadly speaking, in humanity. But also, I mean, when I say 2 years of time, I mean, do you have an hour a day
Mm-hmm.
to put into training the basic skills? 5 minutes of single pointed focus practice, 5 minutes of this, 5 minutes of that, blah 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 for the cumulative 60 minutes. Most people have that, if we're being honest. And if you do that over the course of this time, plus do rituals for the things you want, you'll get there faster than you think. Because that's another thing too. A thing I have noticed is a lot of people who have been adjacent to magic for
Mm.
decades cumulatively did very little. It's like saying, I've been playing drums for 10 years. No, you've owned a set of drums for 10 years and you've been actively playing for like three cumulatively.
I agree. I
So
gotta duck out for like 3 minutes, but I'll be right back.
your
But
best.
keep going without me.
Yeah. No, but truly, like I see that as a problem. And to turn it back to the Witchblood thing, the whole like I'm special and from a special background, I'm not going to have to work as hard because some people do rely on their natural gifts a bit too much until that natural gift stops having anything to do with what you're trying to do now. And you're like, well, I'm just not going to do this thing I'm trying to do now because I'm not naturally good at it. That's like the gifted kid syndrome. And I think Witchblood people have that pretty bad.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's also useful, like if you've trained seriously in something else, it gives perspective on that because it's like you've got like a really solid music background.
Sure.
Sarah's got math. I teach a sport, and so it's like I deal with like people training, uh, both on casual and really serious levels on stuff every day, like day in day out. Um, and so like I get to see a lot of that um people who have talent and try to ride the talent versus people who have no talent but work really hard and get there, or people who they are like, well, I can make these things work because I'm good at this. And it's like, yeah, but it's not the right way to do this. And when you run up against something real or something serious, then these ways that you're kind of cobbling together may not work. I think that's where Witchblood can trip people up too, is that it gives you a lot more room to make those cobbled together things work. And so like you can fall into that trap of this is all I need ever. Uh and but then still try to go down that road of going into deeper and deeper stuff without ever like building up anything beyond that. Which I guess is like not quite the same as that like being adjacent thing, but ends up being similar to it where it's like, yeah, I've collected a lot of books. I haven't read them. I haven't like explored them. I haven't tried to do things with them. I've been on a lot of forums, but I haven't learned anything from anyone there. Like I think tons of people do that as well. But then you also get people who are just like they're kind of happy with their, oh, I've got some talent and so I can make these things work for me, but I don't need to figure out more leverage or figure out more ways to empower that or more ways to direct that in a more efficient or more powerful fashion.
I mean, and I guess some people genuinely don't need to do more. I mean, that's the thing too. If you're truly happy with where you are, and crucially, it works,
Mhm.
then I mean, hey, push play, my guy. Like do whatever it is you feel like you need to do with your life. Like not everybody needs to be Olympic level at a skill. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I
so
Like
think
a decent drawer. Like I can draw a person and it's recognizably that person. But I know that if I like put in the work, I
mm.
could be like a real artist, but I'm not gonna do that and I don't want to do that. And I think it's totally okay. Like you're allowed to just dabble in magic. Not everybody has to be a
Oh, truly,
yeah,
serious. My whole thing, magician.
yeah, that's
yeah,
absolutely true. Though I will say though that I think that I mean, the only thing I can adjacently compare it to that isn't like psychotic like the martial arts in terms of like like dabbling in fighting is fine until you like get in a fight, then
yeah,
like you better hope you can. But like when it comes to like say musicianship, nobody is going to look at a guitar player who's pretty good and be like you're this virtuosically amazing person if you yourself are a musician, right? Like you can look at it in that whole thing. I think the one difference though is that magic is held to an ephemeral standard, which again is a problem I do not believe is solvable
Mm-hmm.
because different cultures, different traditions, different systems, different everything have different standards for how they judge this. Like, for example, I know Solomonic magicians who, if they're being candid with you, will tell you, I have never seen nor heard a spirit once. I literally just follow the directions and it always works. And their success rate will be freakishly high in terms of the thing they ask for, but
Mm-hmm.
they've never seen or heard a spirit directly. And there are some traditions that will be like, you suck, full stop. And there
Mm-hmm.
are other traditions will be like, why do you care about seeing it? You are worth $10 million in the case of one specific individual I know is worth crazy money because he just follows the directions. and and has no opinion about it. The man has no connection to pride about this. He's like, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't even believe in this shit if it didn't always work for me. You know what I mean? Like, so like again, standards are ephemeral and difficult to
Agreed.
parse, even with more codified.
That is because like we're taking all these effectively unrelated things and calling them that.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
You can be super good at one piece and garbage at another piece.
Yeah.
And that I think is another problem with like the way we evaluate. Like magic is not one thing. It's like all different.
No, truly. I do wish magic was approached in a truly multidisciplinary way, like literally everything else in the world is. Because like in martial arts, you can be a great striker and terrible at grappling. You know what I mean? And you're not considered less of a fighter.
Right.
Just like don't let them take you to the ground, right? You know, in a similar way, like I can't read music. I'm a guitar player, you see. We will create entire systems to avoid reading music, which I think is wonderful and amazing. But like there are plenty of musicians I know personally who consider me basically a shit musician, even if I can improv better than them. You know, but they'll be like, you can't read music, you're not really the thing. You're functionally illiterate is what they'll say. And they won't say it in like a mean, well, some of them will, but they won't generally say it in like a mean way, but they'll say it in like, this is the standard that has been set forth by my classical music education. And you're like, I literally can't hear you over how hard I'm rocking the fuck out right now. So, you know, and so it goes. And I believe that if that conversation was had more about magic, I think we'd all be happier, less prone to online arguments individuals. Or maybe that's just me being naive.